Give me a moment to remember to do that. So as I said, this event is organized by Binghamton University's Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention, or IGMAP as we call it. Binghamton University sits on the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee people, specifically the Onondaga and Oneida. My name's Nadia Rubai. I'm one of the co-directors of IGMAP, and I'm speaking to you from the land stolen from another group of Haudenosaunee, the Cayuga. We acknowledge Indigenous lands as part of the start of every IGMAP event to remind ourselves of our violent history and our corresponding contemporary responsibilities. And it seems particularly relevant in a context when we're hearing stories of loss and reconciliation in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a way to call attention to how narratives about land disputes and policy and sovereignty and politics often obscure the effects of conflicts on individuals and families. So today's the second day in a full week of events in collaboration with the Parent Circle Family Forum, where we're delving into stories of loss and reconciliation in a way that's intended to help us better understand how human suffering, resilience, and love within the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can help us really appreciate how individuals can be change agents in changing the narrative of hate and dehumanization and building societal resilience, promoting peace, and helping to reduce and prevent mass atrocities. Our hope is that the events this week will give people ideas about things that they can do in their own lives, modeled on the courage and the love demonstrated by the people involved in the parents' family, the parent circle. So the session today focuses on the power of women and the power of mothers in particular. And I'm going to start with a short video clip. And then we may show some others later on. And then I'm going to let Robi and Laila jump in and tell their stories, because any introduction that I would provide to either of them will not do them justice. If you want to be able to see the video better, you may want to switch to gallery view, or it may happen automatically when I share my screen. So let me do that now.
אני לא יכולה לחשוב על משהו יותר מרגש ולחשוב על הבן שלי שנהרג. האם זה לא הדבר הכי חשוב שעשיתי בכל השנים שאני בשטח? אם אנחנו יכולים לבוא לפה ולהיות ביחד, וואו, אנחנו יכולים לשנות את העולם. וזה הגיע הזמן שהקול שלנו, שכולם ישמעו את הקול שלנו.
ما فيش ام في العالم لما بستشهد ابنها او بنقتل ابنها ما بتحب تشوفه. انا لما بروح على دير ياسين وبقعد مطرح ما حرقوا بتمنى بقول يا ريت كنت هناك بس اشوف ابني، انقذ ابني. انا بعرف كان اسرائيليه او فلسطينيه، احنا اميات إلنا قلوب بغض النظر عرب فلسطينية إسرائيلية. أنا أم وبحس مع كل أم كان فلسطينية أو إسرائيلية. الابن ابن.
المرأة هي نص المجتمع، فالمرأة هي بتقدر هي الأم هي الأخت. أنا بعتقد إن المرأة يعني هي بتقدر إنها تحمي دارها وولادها، وإن المرأة يعني دورها بالصراع إنها هي بتقدر تمنع زي ما حكيت أولادها عن ينزلوا بالمظاهرات، تربي أولادها على الحب والحنان.
So thank you very much. I just want to ask one question of XP, JP, Jennifer Gordon, and Leah Mattel. This is a really intimate conversation, and we are sharing personal stories with you, and it will be so kind of you if you open your cameras so that we can look at you. It's difficult to talk to sort of black squares with XP. Thank you. Thank you. Come on, XP, it's not that difficult. Laila, who's going to start?
I hope if you start, because I sneeze a little bit because I have allergy from the weather, so maybe it will be better.
Poor excuse. So thank you very much for inviting us, Nadia. I know that you had much bigger ambitions, but it doesn't matter. Whoever's heart you touch is what is important. And if somebody takes what they learned today and puts it into their own life and into change, making change, then it's all worthwhile. And I have to say that now that there are so many families of bereaved all over the world from Corona, and people who never had a chance to say goodbye, I think it would be wonderful if they would join us in the ceremony that we have. And if any of you know families that have lost, because they might be inspired to take that terrible sadness and the fact that they couldn't say goodbye and be inspired by people who took that grief and tried to make a difference in the world. It doesn't have to be in the work we're doing, but it certainly could be something in your community, something about racist behavior, something about animals, whatever touches your heart, because that gives you a reason to get up in the morning. So thank you, Leo, for coming. I'm pleased to see you. I'm not sure where to really start. I don't know how many of you have seen the film. Have they seen the documentary, Nadia?
No, we're showing that. We're showing one of the documentaries this evening, and then another one on Wednesday evening. Sorry. So those are not. They have not yet been shown.
Okay. So as you probably recognize, my accent not very Israeli. I come from South Africa originally, and was fighting apartheid from maybe 6 years old. I don't know, I keep asking in lectures for people to go back and look for their first act of social justice. And mine was at 5-year-old to steal a horse because the man who brought the milk was beating the horse. So I went with my friend, Barbara Fudge, and we stole the horse and we brought it home and put it in our tennis court. And my father came home and found a horse in the tennis court. He was not thrilled. Something like 2 months after that, I was sent to boarding school. But actually, if you think about it, that's the first act of social justice. And the very fact that you are here today means there's something in your life that made you be aware that you could do something to change. And it doesn't have to happen now. I mean, we've got a very intimate group, so maybe we'll have time. But if you think about it, you'll find that act of social justice that you did once and what changed your course in your life and where you are today. When the soldiers came to tell me that my son David had been killed by a Palestinian sniper, apparently one of the first things that I said was, "You may not kill anybody in the name of my child." I think that was really, I mean, I don't even remember saying that, of course not, but the people who were with me remembered that. And that was really a very prophetic statement about what I was going to do with my life. I knew very well that I wanted to do something to prevent other mothers, specifically mothers or families too, but my focus was on mothers, from experiencing this pain that actually never goes away. You learn to live with it next to you, but it's there all the time. And it depends what you decide to do with it. So I spoke at a huge demonstration. I don't know where I got the guts to do this. This was something like 3 months after David was killed. And people from the parents' circle heard me talking. And actually, I could have written what I said then, so many years ago, today, because it's almost the same as I believe, because I said, we cannot find peace alone. We have to have a partner. And that partner needs to be a Palestinian. And so they came to talk to me, this man who actually created the parents' circle. He was a religious Jewish man whose son was kidnapped and killed by the Hamas. And he wanted to go on a different path. And he was quite extraordinary, because when you think about it, the people in his own community, the religious people in his community, would not pray with him, because he had decided that he was not going to go on a path of revenge, but rather he would support Yitzhak Rabin, who was in those days the prime minister and was looking for a peace agreement. He actually went with Rabin to receive the Nobel Prize. He was quite a bulldozer, and even more than me, and I'm telling you that that's not easy to find. And he came to see me, and he said, would I come to a weekend in East Jerusalem with other bereaved families, Palestinian and Israeli? And I wasn't very enthusiastic, because I didn't realize then that those were the people really that were the only people that could understand. And I did go to the weekend, and I remember sitting around a table and looking into the eyes of the Palestinian mothers. And that's when I realized that we shared the same pain. And that's when I realized that together, if we harness this possibility of standing on a stage and talking in the same voice for reconciliation and nonviolence, would that not be the most powerful act we could do? Look, think about it. You know, when Hillary Clinton had the Democratic Convention, do you remember the Black mothers stood on the stage, the bereaved Black mothers? And they told their stories, and it was extremely powerful. But maybe 3 days later, the mothers of the police officers who'd lost their sons came onto the stage and spoke, and that too was powerful. But if they had been together, can you imagine how extraordinary that would have been? So, you know, all of these things made me go to meet Black mothers in America, but that's another story. Anyway, after I'd been to this weekend, I realized that this is what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And it's not like an hour a day fun. This is a commitment for the rest of your life, more or less. It's a 24-hour-a-day commitment. It's not about ego. It's not about anything. It's about really believing what you say, because if you do, then you don't have to prepare anything. I never prepare anything when I go to talk. It just comes out of the heart, whatever happens on that day. And so I started to travel all over the world. And I really was very pleased with myself and thought I was very special. And I spoke in Congress and in the House of Lords and in hip hop concerts. You can't imagine, wherever they're invited, always with a Palestinian partner. And it was, of course, because I spoke English, it helped. I mean, some people think you're intelligent because you speak English if they happen to be foreign. They don't realize that if you were born somewhere where you spoke English from the beginning, it doesn't mean that you're extremely intelligent. In any event, traveling the whole world, I was really very pleased with myself. And one night when I was back in Israel and I was working on my computer, there was another knock on my door. And I went to the door, and There were 3 soldiers standing there. And when 3 soldiers come to your door, it can only mean one thing. So I slammed the door in their face. And they kept knocking and knocking and knocking. And eventually I opened the door and they said, we've come to tell you that we caught the man who killed your son. I think they thought I would dance around my lounge with joy and revenge. But of course, this was the most difficult thing that could happen, because now there is a face. It is no longer going around talking about peace and reconciliation and reading bad poetry and rainbows and all of the stuff that goes along with a lot of jargon and peacemaking. Now is the tough thing to see if I mean what I say. If I can do this work in any form of integrity, I have to walk the talk. I didn't see it for something like 3 months. And eventually, what happened was I wrote a letter to the family of Thaya. Thaya is the man that killed David. I'd been boiling up to do this for weeks, and I think it took me 10 minutes to write the letter, if that. And in it, I told them about the parent circle, that we are more than 600 families who've all lost an immediate family member, and that what we see is that with any future political peace agreement, there must be a framework for a reconciliation process. Because up to now, we've signed all kinds of papers on the White House lawn, but the people were never involved. And so what we could expect if we didn't have that framework would simply be another ceasefire until the next time. And so I also told them about David. David was my son. He was studying at Tel Aviv University for his master's in the philosophy of education. He was part of the peace movement, and he was teaching to kids before the army, philosophy. And he was then called up to go to the reserves, as most young Israeli men are after they've served in the army. And he came to see me and he said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to serve in the occupied territories. And if I don't go, what happens to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And what happens to my students? Because they were going to be inducted into the army. Is that the right thing to do? I was filled with a sense of dread. And then, nevertheless, he went. You see, you don't always know who the person is behind the gun. You might think you do, but you don't. And he also said something else, which was very important. If I go, then I will treat people with respect, and so will all my soldiers. In any event, I also said in the letter to the parents of Thaya that we owed it to our children and grandchildren to meet. We must find a new way not to kill each other. And of course, they were quite shocked, as you can imagine. 2 Palestinians from our group actually delivered this letter. And they said they would give it to their son. I'm not the most patient character in the Middle East. So of course I was at my letterbox like 3 days later waiting for a letter, which took something like 3 years. And it came over the Palestinian website. And in it, it was not exactly a letter from Martin Luther King. He said that I was crazy and that I should stay away from his family, and that he killed 10 people to free Palestine. But you see, you always know that there's something else going on. When he was a very little boy, he saw his uncle violently killed by the Israeli army, and he lost 2 further uncles in the second uprising. And so for him, it was, I think, an act of revenge. He was not affiliated to any political party, but he went to the Fatah part of the jail. Jail is separated with Hamas and Fatah. He chose to go there. He became a folk hero. They made a film about him and wrote a book about him. Something extraordinary happened when I got that letter. I gave up being a victim. I realized that my life was no longer contingent on what Thaya would do, and it was fine. I could now continue to do the work, and if we should meet and if he should want to talk to me, That's great, but I was certainly not looking for an apology. I think that's a terribly important thing to realize in this whole path of the work that we do, because forgiving is something about also being at peace with yourself. So then 2 filmmakers came to see me, invited me to go to South Africa to look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and to see what lessons we could learn. And also for me, it was a personal trip back to where my roots were, but also to explore forgiving. What is the meaning of forgiving? You know, Rosemary, can I ask you what you mean when you say you forgive? But you're muted, yeah.
Yes, you're asking me what I
What
didn't.
is forgiving for you?
For me, forgiveness is something that is done it's something to do as much for me as it would be for someone else. I think more so even for me to find peace. You don't have to agree, but to accept and forgive and move on.
Do you think the person needs to be repentant for you to forgive?
No, it helps.
Really? You're a good guy. Okay, let's ask Jenna.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also personally just a type of person where I like physically cannot hold grudges. I absolutely like hate knowing that there's like a sense of tension between me and another person. That often gets me into like apologizing things I don't need to apologize for. But yes, I very, very much value forgiveness.
You know, I don't have the answer to this. It's a very interesting topic, and each of you should go away and think what you mean when you say you forgive. I mean, do you give up your right to justice? Is it okay what the person did? Can they do it again? Should you forget? All of these questions running around in your mind. I met a wonderful South African woman. She was Afrikaans, which usually, if they gave her a label, would mean that she belonged to the apartheid movement, but in fact she didn't. And she had gone to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and she said to the people who killed her daughter, "I forgive you." And I thought, I have to, we were making a film. Did I say that? I don't know. We went to South Africa to make this film called One Day After Peace. And I wanted to know exactly what she meant, because I was seeking this idea of what is forgiving. So I went to see her, and of course we were immediate sisters. You know, mothers who lose children are immediate sisters. There's no need for a bridge. I discovered that in South Africa. I discovered that in America, because after I'd watched the Black mothers on the stage, I went to Atlanta to meet some of them. One of them is Lucia McBath, who became a congresswoman. And we were immediately sisters. We spoke together in the Martin Luther King Museum, and it was a wonderful experience. And I wish I could do more on that. So I went to visit this woman, and I said to her, "Jim, what do you mean when you say you forgive?" And she said, "Forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge." And then after that, I went and I met the man who actually sent the people to kill her daughter. And he said, by her forgiving me, if you don't hear anything else today, hear this. By her forgiving me, she has released me from the prison of my inhumanity. I think that is the most extraordinary statement, and one should really realize that actually today, these 2 people run an NGO for ex-combatants and are doing wonderful work. So if you don't believe in that people can change, not much point in doing this work. After that, I decided to come back and that it was time to meet Saya. And everything's in the way. Of course, who was in the way was me, because this is like trips off my tongue now rather easily, but this is not easy. And so I sat for the whole weekend thinking, what will I do with all of this? How will I want to meet him, but do I want to meet him? Everything's in the way. I need a go-between. I don't use the word mediator in this case. I think go-between is better. Mediator, there's something about compromise somewhere along the line. And so I decided, okay, I'll go and visit the Minister of Justice. She has to give me permission to get into the jail, which I did. And I asked for Bassama Ramin, who is a Palestinian member of the Parent Circle, who you saw last night, some of you, who for me is above the conflict. This is like family now, who spent 7 years in jail, whose daughter was killed by the Israeli army, and who I trust completely to be the go-between because he is the same culture, the same language. It's very important in this kind of restorative justice is that the person understands the culture. And so we got permission for that too, and then we were waiting for the police. And then, of course, you may have noticed that Israel has quite a lot of elections now and then, right? So we may be going into our 5th election in the next couple of days. It is quite incredible. And then we got a Minister of Just Us who obviously will not let me anywhere near any jail, but it's fine. You know, I can wait. My life isn't contingent on this man anymore. And so that's where it is in my story. And but I think much more important is to understand how you can take this work, this story, this narrative, this emotional breakthrough that you make through the story and put it into projects that can change everything. And not projects, we are not a group of therapy. We are women and men who have all lost somebody, but we know that this is what we want to do. And we really believe that there has to be an end to violence and that reconciliation is the way to be doing it. Thank you. Laila, it's your turn.
Thank you, Robi. Laila, let's just go straight to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Robi, so much. I heard her story many times, but every time I heard her story, I learn a new thing, really. But before I will start to speak, I will apologize because maybe I will sneeze many times because I have allergic from the weather now. So my name is Layla AlSheikh. I am from Bethlehem. I'm from a village called Battir. I was born and raised in Jordan, but my parents are originally from Bethlehem, but they went to Jordan because my father was an English teacher. And because of that, I speak English good. So after he went there, the war was started in 1967, and he couldn't go back to his house and to his family. So all of us, me and my brothers and sisters, born in Jordan. I finished my study in accounting business. And I met my husband in Jordan. He's originally from Bethlehem. And in 1991, I came to Bethlehem to continue our marriage and to live. So it's for every Palestinian who born outside Palestine, it's a dream come true to come back and live inside Palestine. So the first year was amazing. I was love everything. I tried to visit everywhere, and I was really everything was really amazing for me. And I was so happy. And after this year, we have our first daughter, and we become much happier because we start to have our own family. But unfortunately, after 2 months, the second uprising was start. And that moment, the Israeli government take a decision that they will never give me my Palestinian ID, and that meant that I can't go freely from place to place. And most of the time I will stay at home, but I wasn't care too much because I have my own family to take care of. And I wish that situation will end so soon, but unfortunately it's become worse and worse every day. The second year we have our second child. He was a boy, and he was a very beautiful, intelligent boy. We named him Qussay, and we become much happier because our family become bigger, and I will be busy all the time with them and not be sad when I think about my family in Jordan that I couldn't visit them. But unfortunately, this happiness was end 11th of April 2002 when he becomes 6 months old. 4 o'clock in the morning, he was woke up in a very critical condition because one day before, the Israeli soldiers came to our village through tear gas, and he was smell some of it. And at that time, the treatment wasn't good enough as today. So we tried to take him to a hospital inside Bethlehem, but the Israeli soldiers, sorry, stop us because they said it's a military zone, you can't enter. So our second chance was to take him to the next city called Hebron. But at the same time, the Israeli soldiers told us again that the main road is closed. So the only chance that we had is take him to Hebron, but through many villages, the road will be rough and long, sorry. But it was our only chance. After a few time, we faced another Israeli checkpoint. They stopped us. They tried to check the car and check the ID of my husband and my father-in-law. So my father-in-law told them that our son is dying and he should be in the hospital as soon as possible, but they didn't care, and they asked us to stay in the car until they allow us to move. So every minute was so important to his life, and I was thinking to take a risk and go and talk to them. And the risk will be that if they find that I didn't have my Palestinian ID, they will send me back to Jordan, or they will take me to jail, and I will never see my children again. But at that time, I wasn't thinking about myself. The only thing that I was care about is my son and his health. So I went and started to talk to them, but they didn't listen, and they start to laugh, and they asked me to stay in the car. More than 4 hours, they stopped us. And it was the first time I feel hopeless. I couldn't protect my son. I couldn't do anything for him. And that feeling was killing me every minute. So after these 4 hours, we reached the hospital, and the doctors said to us that it was too late for him, and if he will stay alive after 48 hours, he will be a handicap. So for me, it was something I couldn't really imagine. I started to cry. I didn't know what to do. Few minutes later, they take him to the intensive unit care. They didn't let us see him. 2 o'clock in the evening, the doctor came and he asked us to leave. And when I asked him why, he said, because the Israeli soldiers will came and search the hospital. And if they find that your son inside the intensive unit care, they will ask you to leave because they're afraid that the fighters, as they said, came and hide inside the hospital. We talked to him, we begged him, but he said, I can't. So I asked him to see my son, and he said, you have just 5 minutes. Don't touch him, don't kiss him, don't do anything. Just look at him and leave the room because he's in a very bad condition. So we reached the house in the evening. So immediately I went to the phone in my family law house to talk to the doctor. And he started to explain his condition and start to say many, many words. And I start to understand that he tried to tell me something, but I start to convince myself, don't believe him, don't believe what he's talking about. So at that moment, my husband came and he said, what's happening? I told him I didn't understand what he's talking about. So please talk to him, let the speaker on. So when he started to talk, he repeat the same words. So I started to shout at him and say, what do you mean by this? And finally he said, I'm really so sorry, your son died. His word was like a bullet comes from his mouth to my heart, smash it down for many pieces. I start to cry like crazy. It was the hardest moment I've ever had in my whole life. My family was in Jordan. They couldn't be with me. I couldn't be with my son, and everything was complicated. A few minutes later, the house was full of people, relatives, friends, neighbors. But for me, I wasn't cared to any one of them. I just think about my son and start to convince myself that when I return back home, I slept in the car and this is a dream and I will wake up. But unfortunately, that was true. And in the middle of the night, I will tell you about a dream that I have, and I will explain about it later. I maybe slept for 5 minutes, and I dreamed that there was a white dove came and stand on my shoulder and said to me, "Mama, don't cry. I'm so happy." But I woke up and I started crying and started to tell my grandmother and my husband about the dream, and she said to me, if he asked you to do this, you should stop crying. I told her I can't. He asked me anything I could do, but I can't stop crying because he's part of my soul, part of my heart. It was the longest day I've ever had in my whole life. I was wait until next morning until they bring him back to the house to say goodbye for him. Until the moment that they put him in between my arms, I was still think that all of that was lying, and when I will take the blanket off, he will be in a good health and I will hug him again, kiss him, play with him, do everything with him. But since I take the blanket off, I was shocked because his body was blue, and I immediately, without thinking, tried to kiss him in his cheek as I always do when I hold him. But I was shocked. I felt that I kissed frozen rock, and immediately, without thinking, I hugged him so tight because I was thinking maybe some kind of miracle will happen and he will go back to life. But the only thing happened that they take him away from me, and that was the last moment I saw him. Since that moment, I was full of anger and full of sadness and hatred to all the Israelis, because for me, I was believed that all of them responsible about his death. Because every time the Israeli soldiers kill any Palestinian or take them to the jail, they have an excuse that they throw stones against them or they are snipers. But my son just 6 months old, what's the crime that he's done? So I take a decision that I don't want to talk to any Israeli person in my whole life. And at the same time, I didn't want to take revenge, because revenge for me, it's not the choice. It will never bring my son back. So for 16 years, I was refused to have any kind of relationship with any Israeli person until I met one of my friends, and he started to talk about his life because I wasn't so home for many years. And then he started to talk about the Parent Circle Family Forum. And he started to explain how he participated in one of the projects, and I stopped him and I said, "Are you crazy?" And he said, "Why?" I told him, "How could you do this after all this happened?" And he said to me, "I told you because I want you to be part of this organization." I told him, "You are really crazy if you think that I will accept this." He said, "Why?" I told him, "You know what happened to my son." And he said, "Because I know what happened to you, I want you to be part of this organization." And he said, "I want to ask you a question. Why until now you didn't tell your other children about what happened to their brother. I told them because I didn't want them to be part of this cycle of violence. I didn't want to lose any one of them. I lost one of them, and that was much more than enough for me. And he said, if you will join, you will never, it's not just you will protect your children, you will maybe protect other families, not just their children. In the beginning, I wasn't really convinced about what he said. I said he's crazy. Maybe he imagined that. I don't think there's something like this really exists. Until one day when he invited me to Bethlehem, there were a conference for the forum. When I arrived, there were just Palestinians. I sat with them. We started to talk about many things. Then when the Israelis started to come and enter that room, I stand up to leave. I start to feel that there is something back me in my chest, and I don't want to see any one of them. Then he said to me, don't leave now, please sit and listen to them. And after that, decide whatever you want, and I will never ask you anything about this. So when they started to enter that room, I was shocked when I saw them hug each other and kiss each other, not like just a friend, like even family members. They were so close together. So I really touched, and I was want to sit, to listen, to know what's the thing that make them so close, like that to each other. This is the first time I saw something like that. So when both sides start to talk about their personal stories, and especially the Israelis, I was really shocked, because for the first time I looked at them as a human like me, people who suffered, who lost their beloved ones. And I felt that really we share the same pain, we share the same tears, even we have a different situations, but the pain is the pain, and we share the same price. So from that moment, I decided really to participate in the project of the forum, and one of them was called Bereaved Narrative Project. So the first day they asked us to talk about something happened during the conflict affecting our lives. So it was the first time I speak about what happened to my son. And since his death for 16 years, I wasn't talking to anyone of my family about what happened. Like, I closed my mind and my heart about him, and I didn't want to open anything about that day. So I started to talk about him, and after maybe in the middle of the story, I stopped because I started to cry. I couldn't complete it. I start to bring all the memories back. It's like to open the wound again after all these years. Everything go back to my mind. And there were an Israeli woman came, and she sat in front of me, and she started to apologize. I was shocked and told her, why you apologize? And she said, I know that the people who hurt you from my own people, and I'm really so sorry for this. And I'm a mother too. I could understand your pain. I could understand the word that you couldn't say. And she came and hugged me. And I was really touched, because it was the first time someone talked to me like that, even from my own family. No one talked to me like this. And she didn't know by her simple words that she touched really my heart. And she helped me to open my eyes again, to open my mind, to understand and realize what happened around me. So after that, I was really start to think to be a member, not just someone who participate and lift the forum. So I started to give lectures inside Israel, Palestine, and even around the world about spread the message of peace and reconciliation. But I discovered a lot of things about me, and discovered a lot of things around me. That one of the things that you couldn't go and talk to people about all these beautiful words about peace and reconciliation unless you feel it from inside. And I start really to feel that. I start for the first time feel secure, feel that there's something strange in me start to happen. And during that time, I start to remember that dream about my son and the white dove. And I start to realize that God sometimes give us signs or symbols, but when we felt of hatred and anger, we couldn't think about that clearly. So I start to realize that was a message from God that what happened will bring peace in some way. So I start to think about many things. And one of the things that I stopped looking to myself as a victim, and I start to look to myself as a survivor. And one of the things that helped me to think like that when I start to go to the schools and start to understand the situation of the soldiers who would go to the army at the age of 17 and 18 in that crazy situation. And I start to realize that they are the victims, not me. They are the victims of their government and their law. When you send a child at the age of 17 or 18 and give him a gun during that crazy situation, he will do anything, even maybe without thinking. So from that moment, even I decided to start to rethink about forgiveness. And forgiveness, it's something so important to any person. It's not about forget, because some people think that if you want to forgive people, that means you will forget your son or you forget pain. No, the pain is still inside, but the anger, the hatred is gone. And when you feel of anger and pain and hatred, it's like there's the heavy things in your shoulder and your back, and it will never let you do a lot of things. And one of the important things that I wasn't asleep for 16 years. Most of the days I was woke up for 2 days without sleep for 1 moment maybe. And after I take that decision, I start to feel really that I felt that heavy things on my shoulder gone. And I start to feel that I'm like a butterfly. Yeah, I'm a huge butterfly, but I have the same feeling. So thank you so much. And thank you to give me this opportunity to share it with you. Thank you so much.
Wow. Nadia, you know what? I don't know how much time we have, but I think it would be very nice to put one of the clips. Just remind me what you still have.
We have
You have the Women's Day, and you have
for two Women's Day.
let's take the very current one about the flowers.
Okay.
And I'll just tell you very quickly what it is. We decided that we wanted every year on International Women's Day, we do something like breaking that wall, like walking up Rothschild Boulevard and giving flowers to people, and Palestinian and Israelis from our group, women. And that's very brave of 70 Palestinian women to come and walk up Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv on a Friday morning. And we gave flowers to the public, and on each flower was written, "We'd rather give you a flower than put one on a new grave." And this year we decided we wanted to congratulate Kamala Harris. So we took 24 women, 12 Palestinian, 12 Israeli. We picked wild flowers, not the ones that are endangered, and we pressed them into a beautiful album. And each woman made a sentence, and it's a really, really lovely gift to give her. And hopefully I'll be in the States. Hopefully, Laila, you'll get a visa, and because there's a new administration, and we can be there in the fall, so we can give it to her in person. So this is the little clip that we made from this wonderful day. And I'll just say one thing, you know, the most extraordinary thing for me in this whole book was that we did a Zoom and Gloom beforehand, and all the women explained why they brought this particular flower. And what was so extraordinary was that the Palestinian mothers, who don't get the same opportunities to tell their stories as Israeli mothers, but for the first time, they really spoke about the relationship between that particular flower and their child, and not how they died. And for me, that's a next step in healing and hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about. So let's watch that. But can you also tell us how much time we have?
We have a little over a half hour left, so we'll still be able to have some discussion.
Okay.
Good.
الوردة هذه قطفتها عشان إهداء مني لروح ابني.
Dear Madam Vice President, the bereaved Palestinian and Israeli women members of the Parents Circle Families Forum find that International Women's Day is an ideal day to congratulate and to honor you. We would like to share with you a gift and commemorates the loss of our 24 children, sisters, brothers and parents.
بيوم عائشة شيلا بينهم بأمي صالح نهراق مאז שהוא נהרג אני לא חוגגת את يوم عائشة.
أنا اليوم قطفت هاي الوردة من هون لأنه ما قدرت أقطفها من عند قبر ابني لأنه كتير صعب أشيل إشي من عند قبره.
وحابة أهديها كمان لكل أم ثكلة فقدت ابنها. אני כתבתי את הברכים מהאנדרטה של הילדים, וזה הלבן, זה הלב שלהם, הלבן, שהם לא עשו כלום בחיים שלהם.
أنا ليلى الشيخ من بتير بيت لحم. أنا أم الشهيد قصي وعضوة في منتدى العائلات الثكلة.
أنا منى أبو سارة من القدس، أم للشهيد خالد أبو سارة.
הפרח שאני בחרתי זה אמנון ותמר, שכתבתי מהקבר של אבא שלי. זה מתחבר גם לתאומים שלי שיש לי, הלל ותמר. ובשבילם בעצם אני עושה את כל העשייה הזאת, את כל הפעולה הזאת. לתת להם איזושהי תקווה במקום הזה. ואומנם יש כאן 24, 12 ישראליות ו12 פלסטיניות, אבל אנחנו מדברות בשם ארגון שלם.
أنا اليوم عضوة في منتدى العائلات الثكلة الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي. حابة كمان هذه الوردة تكون رسالة، إنه هذه رسالة سلام ورسالة أمل لحد ما إنه نوقف الألم، نوقف الثكل.
So now we have the opportunity for those of you who are with us to ask questions, share reactions. I know it's hard in these moments. I'll get us started. The way the two of you described your stories, Robi, you had an immediate reaction, according to those who were around you, to hear you to say, you may not kill anyone in my son's name. And Laila, you described a much longer process of getting to that point of thinking in those terms. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how the Parents Circle currently decides how to reach out to new parents who have had family members killed as part of the conflict. When is everyone will reach the time of being ready for this, open to this, receptive to it at different points. And so what is the process that you use to try to help bring people to this way of thinking and this level of commitment to peace and to not perpetuating the violence?
Well, it depends. You know, some people are ready almost immediately, and some people, it might take years and it might never happen. During the Gaza war, we had this tent in Tel Aviv. Every night we met during the war, and of course you can imagine we were not exactly at the height of our popularity, because a lot of people thought, how dare we be against what was happening in Gaza, and many people also came because they were against war and violence, and they wanted to find some solace. And most of them were actually bereaved, or not most of them, but a lot of them. So they joined automatically. We can usually, you know, Israel is a very small country. And so when somebody gets killed, I have the most beautiful things written about David that were sent to me. And people know how, people read in the paper all the stories. And so it was much easier to really recruit me in a way. We don't arrive in somebody's doorstep and try to force them to do something. And people are committed at different levels and at different times. There always is that core in any organization of people who are totally mad, like, no, I'm not allowed to say mad. Here's a good thing to say to all of you. The language that you use. You see, when I say mad to Americans, they think I'm angry. But in South Africa or in England, it would be crazy. So, you've got to be very careful what language you use in this whole work that we do. So I think it's very different on the Palestinian side, and it's also a society that's very close, that know each other, and Laila can certainly talk about that. But it's people usually find us. That's the thing. I wish there were many more people, but we don't want members, new members, but people who've lost in the past, who would understand this extreme sense of solace that you get with being able to tell your story. It's like what I tried to tell you in the beginning, this opportunity to share your story is a very healing process in many ways. And you touch the hardest of hearts. I mean, I have spoken to people who loathe and despise me before I even opened my mouth. And I travel a lot in the West Bank when there's no corona, and go into Palestinian houses. And in the beginning of a dialogue meeting, there's a lot of anger. But when you share your story, how can people be left with no empathy? And even if you don't agree with me, and that is what we say in the parent circle, is to listen. And even if you don't agree, to have empathy while you listen. And that, I think, is a really good piece to start ending a conflict, is when you are able to listen with empathy. Because look at all of the television. I don't know how bad, it's bad enough. In Israel, it's outrageous. You cannot listen to anything in a studio with more than 2 people because everybody's shouting everybody down. And so, this ability to listen is incredible. Laila, do you want to say something, darling?
Yeah, I want to say that in the forum, there's more than 600 families, but even there's more than 2,000 people who participate in the project, and they didn't lose their beloved ones. So when they went to their families or their friends, they started to talk about what happened inside the forum, and they start to talk about the forum. So from one to other, they start to hear that. So this is what happened to me when one of my friends, he wasn't lost any beloved ones, but he came and he talked to me about the forum. And we went to the houses of the Palestinian and talked to them about this with an Israeli partner. And sometimes we went to the schools inside Israel to talk to the student who will go to the army at the age of 17 or 18. And some of them lost their beloved ones. And for them, most of them, they didn't met any Palestinian person. And even for Palestinian, most of them, they didn't met an Israeli person. So they were, every time they are shocked when they start to hear our stories. So even it's not easy for us to talk to the people about this. I will tell you a small story happened to me when they asked me on the forum to talk to girls at the age of 17 and 18, and they will went to the army, and I wasn't sleep the whole night, because when I heard that they are soldiers, you mean what that meant for me and the feeling that I have all the night. But when I went there and looked at them, I was shocked because they are the same age of my daughter. So I said, I will never look at them as soldiers. I will look to them as the same age of my daughter. They are my daughters, and I will talk to them like that. So in the beginning, we started to talk about our personal stories with my Israeli partner, And then about the forum, and they start to ask us questions. So one of them, she asked me and she said, so what do you want from us to do? And I said, wow, it's the time now to catch it in a good way. So I started to say to her, look, all of you, I love you as I love my daughter, and I wish the best for you. So I can't convince you to choose because this is your life and I don't know anything about your life. And even my daughter, I couldn't force her to do something. I give her the advices. If she wants to listen, it's okay. If she didn't, it's her life and her decisions. So the only thing that I could make you or give it to you, I will give you an advice. If you take a decision that you will go to the army, so please, if you choose to be in the checkpoint or any other places, deal with any person, not just even the Palestinian, because we have other people from foreign countries. Some of them are Christians, some of them are Muslims. Don't look at what they are wearing or how they are speaking or their language or whatever their background is. Look to them as a human. This is the only message that I will tell you about, because this is what changed me from the beginning when I looked at the Israeli as a human like me, not my enemy. And when we start to think about the definition of enemy, it's not just a person who are Palestinian or Israeli. Maybe he will be one of my friends. Maybe the enemy is one of my relatives. I don't know who is my enemy. So this is one of the things, not just help us to spread the message of peace and reconciliation. Every time we do a lecture everywhere, whatever, inside Palestine or Israel, or even around the world, we learn new things. We learn many, many things during our journey. Even we start to discover something inside us we didn't maybe realize it before. So it's a great chance for us even to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. What questions do people have? Jenny, go ahead.
I have a question for Layla, although it might be for Robi as well. You mentioned, I think that for, first of all, thank you both very much for sharing and for the amazing work that you're doing. Layla, you mentioned that for a long time you didn't talk to your other children about what happened to your son and their brother. And I'm wondering if you eventually did talk to them, how old they were and how you told them about that.
In the beginning, when I went to the forum and started to go to all the to participate in the project, until that moment, my children wasn't know anything about that. So because I want to give myself a chance to understand the situation that I'm in, the new situation, to start to think how I will tell them. Because my oldest daughter, she was at the age of 18, and the other one was 16. I have 5 children anyway, and 13, and the youngest one, she was 3 at that time. So I started to think how I could tell them, and when they know, how could I explain why and how I became a member in this organization and talk to the Israelis and start to convince them about this. So I told them the story. Some of them start to be angry, and sometimes some of them, they start to blame me why I go to the forum. I start to be part of it. So I start to explain for them. Not the whole Israeli is the same. We have scripture in the Quran said, I will say it in Arabic in the beginning and I will translate. لا تزر وزيرة وزر أخرى. It means that you can't blame the whole people because of mistake of one person. So I start to convince them and start to talk to them from that point, and they start to realize and understand. And I told them examples like, we have 5 fingers in our arm, not the whole fingers the same. Some of them are short, some of them are thin, or there's a difference. And we are like a human, we have many kind of difference. Not the whole Muslims or the Arabs are good, and not all the Jewish are bad. There's bad and good in every person. Inside me, maybe I will sometimes think as a good person, sometimes I have an evil thought, but how could I control myself and be a good person? This is what I should choose. And the easiest way is to go and have revenge. It's easy, but the hardest thing is to think and start to think about your future, about your children, about many things in your life. And if I will do this, what I will like achieve, if I will take a revenge, what will happen to me? So I start to talk to them like that. And after time, they start to understand, they start to really want to be part of the forum. So this is amazing thing when I always imagine that our children like a good seed. You try to put it in a good, what I call, you planted them in a good way or in a good place, and you give them the water and the sun, and everything will be good. So I think it's so important to talk to the children at the age of maybe so early, or even sometimes if I have the same situation that I have, but try to think so deep to talk to them, because they are so sensitive to every word, and they think much deeper sometimes than us. They try to think about everything that you said. And the most important thing for a mother, that the children always feel that their mother like as an idol, and they try to learn, even if sometimes I didn't teach them something, but they saw me how I act or how I speak to other persons, and they will learn from me. So not just sometimes you teach them to do this or not to do that. Just let them see you, how you act, and they will learn from you. Thank you.
I think it's really important, I just think it's really important to understand that bereavement doesn't stop with me, and that the siblings are so important in all of this reaction to how after loss, because in many cases, what happens is the mother becomes the central figure, and the siblings are left out of this. But even greater than that is to understand that the mourning doesn't stop with me. My grandchildren also are affected by what happened. I saw this became so clear to me every year. Laila, I was just thinking, you've got to bring your kids to the summer camp. So we have a summer camp every year, and my grandchildren were there. And my granddaughter, who never met David, told the story, and apparently she was weeping bitterly while she told the story. It doesn't stop. I wish I'm so proud that my grandchildren want to be a part of this as well. It's important, but you cannot force it. It's something that they have to choose to do themselves. It's different for me, it's different for Israelis. We have much more opportunity for sharing, for psychological help if you wanted. And I wish for my Palestinian, and by the way, if you want to do anything after this whole thing that we're talking about, I think the most important thing that you can do is to try to get Israel to vaccinate all the Palestinian population. This is cruel beyond speech, and it's illegal, and it's immoral. And by the way, it's also extremely stupid, because if all the settlers can get vaccinated and they live absolutely next door to the Palestinians, then surely they all shop at the same supermarket. Would it not be a good idea to vaccinate everybody? And if you have any influence, and if you can write a letter or something to somebody that might change this attitude, it's cruel. And Israel is almost free of this corona now. 70% of the population have been vaccinated. And so, you know, we were allowed to even meet over the Passover, and they're thinking about not wearing masks anymore outside. And yet around the corner are 3 million people who need to be vaccinated. I'm sorry, but I think that's important to say, because it's not all rosy, and there are things that you can do. You can write to your congressman. And I'm a great believer in letters, by the way. And another thing that I wanted to say is, because there are so many people around you who have lost, tell them if they couldn't say goodbye, to write a letter to that person, because it's a way of saying goodbye, and it's a way of not forgetting. And I can tell you personally, I have a whole series of letters that I've written to David. It's not a monument of misery. There are funny things about South Africa. There are funny things about my life now. You know, one tends not to recognize what gratitude is. I have to tell you that I am extremely grateful for my life now. I know that sounds really weird, but consider the fact of how many opportunities I've had to be part of change in people's lives since I lost David. Think of how many places I've been all over the world, and how many hearts have touched mine and I have touched theirs. So there is a sense of gratitude in everything that I, even talking to you now, where would I have seen all these faces? You know, it's just, I feel very honored to have this opportunity. You can ask a nasty question of Laila if you like.
What questions do people have? Go ahead, Yakabi.
Hi, I just wanted to reiterate, thanks so much for sharing these powerful stories. I wanted to know if Robi could expand upon her experience speaking with the Black mothers, and how could we sort of think about it, reframing issues to draw connections between the crisis happening between Israel and Palestine and some issues that are happening in the United States, and how can we sort of think about what's happening here differently? I speak for myself in saying that I see a lot of empathy given towards the crisis in Israel and Palestine, but not that same level of empathy is focused on or refocused on issues in the United States. So I just wanted to see if you could expand upon your experiences speaking to those groups.
You know, firstly, I don't have the monopoly on truth. Okay, all I can tell you is that I think storytelling is probably the most important way to break down barriers, because when you know each other through a story, and what happens in America is you don't actually, all the polarization, I read a whole research, I think one of the guys, Karen, who came to talk about his research on polarization. And if you really understand, there's much less polarization than you think there would be if you would actually make contact with the people that you think are, that you don't agree with at all. So that's one of the things, you have to reach out and talk to the people that you don't really think you have anything in common with, because you probably do. That's how extraordinary it is. With the Black mothers and with the mothers of the police officers, it was very interesting, and I really, really wanted to stay in America for a year or two, because one of the things that I recognized was they didn't know how to tell their story. It was not focused, it was all over the place, it went on for hours, so that people, you know, people have a very limited way of listening. There's a limit. And so maybe within your school, you could find somebody who could open up some kind of department to help people tell their story, which would be a narrative department. You know, I'm thinking for the parent circle, what I want to do is to go back over the 30 years that this organization has been in place, and to make testimonials for 30 years. How did this all happen? Who are the people that transformed? They are the most extraordinary stories. And it all comes through this ability to share with other people. And it's difficult. The whole situation of Blacks now and of coming up out into the open, maybe something good will come out of that. You know, it's like giving up being the victim and sharing and allowing that person into your life. You know, I don't have any secrets from anybody anymore. It's like you've all been into my kitchen. You can see my cat, which usually walks past, and all of that stuff, because it makes us all human. You know, there's so much polarization that it's actually frightening. And the fact that the politicians are playing exactly the same game. There's no, so it's up to you. You know, I just think that people can really make a difference. I'll just tell you one little story. Have I got time to do that? I've no idea what the time is or if I have to go away.
We have about 7 minutes left.
How many?
7.
Okay, so I can tell this in 3 minutes. I was invited to go to a meeting in the West Bank for women. And it's actually in the film. And when I came to the West Bank, I was the only Israeli. And I came into the room and there were all these people, and there was a woman there with a picture of her son around her neck, which made it very clear to me that she was a bereaved mother. And she recognized that I was Israeli and she wanted to leave immediately. So I went to talk to her and I said, look, please stay. I want to know what happened to your son. So she sat down with her back to me like this, and we spoke for maybe, I asked her every possible question about her son and what happened to her family and how was it affecting her. And then I asked her, would you like to see a picture of David? And she said reluctantly, okay. And then she turned towards me and I had a picture of David in my hand. And she looked at it and she said, haram, which means what a pity. And you see, that was an emotional breakthrough for her because she recognized that we shared the same pain. Today, this lady has been all over the world with me. I mean, she came out of a tiny little village in the West Bank, and she came to New York with me. The first time she'd ever been out of a village or in a plane. So how much trust does that mean that that person gives you? You know, we donated blood together to different hospitals, Palestinian and Israeli. That's very symbolic. And when we got to New York, I mean, can you imagine, she was totally overwhelmed. So we went to Central Park and we rode on horses, and she smokes like 50 cigarettes a day. And I got her addicted to hamburgers, and we spoke at Lincoln Center. Now, think about this woman. I'm used to all of this. She stood on the stage in Women in the World with 3,000 people and told her story. And 3,000 people, and I told my story, and 3,000 people stood up at the end of that and were all in tears. And so that's the effect of storytelling when it comes from the heart. And maybe your school could be trying to do something like that. I'm sure within the whole campus, there's probably a lot of, I spoke to the restorative justice people yesterday, which was a wonderful, thank you, Nadia, for that. It was a wonderful conversation.
Excellent, they said the same.
So, you know, they could open up, you could open up to allowing people, you have this Truth and Reconciliation Commission going on, right? Where people are telling their stories on the campus. I think that's an incredible opportunity for all students past who have suffered from racist behavior or have been treated badly, who can come and tell their story. And even if it's anonymous, you've got a campus radio. Why not, once a week broadcast one of those stories on the campus radio? Because what happened in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, one of the reasons that it was successful, and there were a lot of problems around it, was the fact that it was broadcast every day, all day long, and people could all hear it. And that was a very important part because most people had no idea. They didn't want to know, which is very similar to here. Israel and Palestine, look, you go into an average Israeli classroom of children aged 17, and we do this the whole year long, and it's very interesting. And you say to the kids, they're 17, we do it especially to 17 and 18-year-olds because they go into the army. And you say to them, who of you have ever met a Palestinian? Guess what? Nobody. Who speaks Arabic? Maybe one in the class. Who's been overseas? The whole class, or almost all the class. But they've never met a Palestinian. I mean, isn't this something totally absurd? Who lives like round the corner from them? And so this is part of, and that not knowing creates a fear, and the fear creates hatred, and the hatred becomes violence. And so whatever we can do to break down that barrier of knowing, that's why I'm willing to go all over the West Bank to talk to women, because I think women have to come to the table now. And we have a really strong women's group, and Laila is one of them, of leaders. And I'm so proud to be your sister, Laila, because I see you changing and growing, and it's wonderful to be part of your life also. Thank you.
Thank you, Robi, so much.
I want to thank both of you for not only talking to us about the importance of stories, but using your stories so effectively. As we talked about yesterday, Rami made the point that people cannot listen to your stories and not be moved, not be changed. And so I think we can all leave this session and the others that we have planned for the week looking for what stories we can share that will be helpful in these kinds of processes, and what stories we need to hear that we need to go out and listen to as part of knowing more people at a very human level, not just lumping them into some category and stereotype. And so I really appreciate that. I also want to remind people that this evening we are at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We are showing the documentary film Within the Eye of the Storm, which features Rami and Bassam's story, as well as the short clip on Our Power is Our Pain. And then tomorrow evening, we're showing the documentary that Robi made mention to, the One Day After Peace, which documents not only the journey to South Africa and the lessons from that process, but also Robi's kind of wrestling with the issue of how to deal with the person who killed her son. And so we welcome you to join us for those. They will be at a time that's in the middle of the night in Israel and Palestine. So we're not asking our guests to join us for those, but we will watch them and then talk about them, debrief them a little bit. And then finally on Thursday, we have another conversation, stories of loss scheduled with Rami and Bassam's sons, who are, so we have not only the perspective of parents, but also of siblings, which is a different but no less poignant form of loss. So thank you, Layla. Thank you, Robi, for being with us and for being willing to share those stories.
And we need to thank Stefan. It's all his fault that we're here.
It is.
So much.
Thank you, Robi and Layla, and for everyone for joining this week. It's been powerful and sort of beyond words. I'm trying to write my thoughts, but it's going to take some time to think about it.
And for those who are interested,
thank you so much.
Close us with a 35-second clip from another International Women's Day, I think, or it may just be a little, it's 35 seconds. So you don't have to be strong. If you'd like to watch that, I'll show that as we sign off We're all hoping that no more people would ever have to be eligible to be members of your group. As great as the work is, we hope that we can stop the process. So let me close with this.
Thank you so much.
أنا إيشا خزكة ما اخترت إني أكون امرأة قوية.
הייתי רוצה להיות אישה חלשה.
אל תגידו לי, תהיי חזקה.
زهقت من هذا الإشي. كنا نساء قويات.
إمهات قويات.
תעשי הכל כדי לא להיות חזקה כמוני.
כמוני. הוא مثلي. הלוואי ולא תגלו כמה כוח באמת יש לכם. אני אישה חזקה.
ما اخترت إني
قوية. הייתי רוצה להיות.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for all
Thank
the work.
you all.
Love to all of you.
Thank you all.